I'll call this meeting to order, and we'll have the pledge of allegiance start us off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I would like Marcy to do a roll call for who's here.
Okay. And I would do that by just reading people's
Reading
names.
the name and.
Okay, so Barry Jordan,
Here.
Brandon Woolley,
Here.
Paul White,
Present.
David McCarthy,
Here.
Grove Newcomb,
Here.
Lori Cahoon, Chris Anderson, Bob La Liberty,
Here.
and Chris Parker.
And if we could have the minutes from the last meeting, read?
Yes. Are you
Yeah,
done?
you can do that.
Okay, I have a draft, so I don't know if there's another one.
As I understand it, we were supposed to, when we vote on it, no longer as a draft, I don't know, that's what I was told.
Oh, okay.
It has to be accepted.
It has to be accepted, that's what,
Okay,
thank you.
so this is the ordinance review committee for graveling, mining, and quarrying minutes of meeting November 30th, 2021, at the Sebago Town Hall. Call to order, the meeting is called to order at 6:01 by Grove Newcomb. Members present, Grove Newcomb, Charles Frechette, David McCarthy, and Brandon Woolley. Members absent, Barry Jordan and Paul White. Selection of chairman for the committee. The committee chose Mr. Newcomb as its chairman for the November 30th meeting. After discussion, the members chose Mr. Jordan as its permanent chairman. Mr. Woolley expressed a concern that more members should be added to the committee prior to choosing a permanent chairman. Mr. McCarthy countered that a first order of business was to elect a chairman in order to establish a structure for the committee to move forward with its business. Number 3, voting for committee members. After discussion, the committee voted to only allow those 5 of the 6-member committee who are residents of the town of Sebago to vote on committee matters. Number 4, public comments. Public comment included suggestion that the committee consider proposing a list of questions to the select board in order to confirm that the committee has authority to contact the Maine Municipal Association, any relevant experts, and the town's legal counsel as necessary for any information necessary for it to conduct its business. Members of the public also raised questions about proper notice of committee meetings, the makeup of the committee, including how it was chosen, and that conflicts of interest be avoided. Finally, a member of the public suggested to the committee that it ensure any proposed changes to the town's ordinances provide necessary clarity to the regulated public. Number 5, committee discussion. Mr. Woolley expressed concern that the ordinances could not be changed without also changing the comprehensive plan. He further described the process and requirements for a municipality to revise its comprehensive plan. Mr. Newcomb said that the committee had been given a clear directive by the town to review the ordinances with respect to quarrying and mining. Mr. McCarthy added that the makeup of the committee was determined by the select board and that the committee will take the necessary time to get its work done, and if the committee needs additional expertise to accomplish its work, it should be able to have access to any necessary experts. He also confirmed that the committee should address with the select board what will be the committee's budget, and that the committee should post notices of its meetings within 2 weeks of such meeting, but would seek clarification on what its requirements are for meeting notices. Mr. McCarthy read the language of the moratorium that was passed by the town on November 23rd, 2021. Mr. Woolley read the portion of the petition for the moratorium that concerns the establishment of the committee. The committee further discussed the requirements of the committee and its makeup. Mr. McCarthy suggested that the members read the comprehensive plan prior to the next meeting in order to be prepared to discuss the relevant ordinances. Number 6, time for the next committee meeting. The committee elected to schedule its next meeting for December 21st, 2021 at 6 p.m. at the Sebago Town Hall. Number 7, meeting adjournment. The meeting was adjourned at 6:45 p.m.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to accept those minutes?
No, I don't want to accept them. We did vote in Mr. Newcomb as a vice chairperson. Didn't we?
So we'll add that to
So
the
can you
record.
add
Okay.
that?
Was there any other additions or errors on that?
No.
Well,
as far as
I'd like to add something, because as she was reading the minutes, you know, I was trying to listen as fast as you were reading, and I, you know, I identified a number of issues there that I felt needed to be discussed or should be discussed. So I'd like to ensure in the future that everybody on the board gets a copy of the minutes prior to the meeting, so we can actually review the minutes.
Yeah, actually, it will be sent, it's been my goal to, once she produces the minutes, emails them to me, I'll email everybody on the committee for everybody's approval before they're posted on the town website. That way you will have them.
Right.
Before
They
they-
wouldn't be able to be published until you actually accepted them, you know, but
Right.
you need to be able to read them first.
Right, exactly. Yep, no, I don't disagree with you at all. That's one of our things that was on my list to do, so. Other than that, are there any other errors or omissions or additions to those minutes? Can I hear somebody make a motion to accept that?
Make a motion that we accept the minutes with the change for Mr. Newcomb as vice chair.
Anyone want to second that?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of accepting those minutes?
Well, I didn't attend the meeting, so I'll abstain.
Yeah, me too. Anybody that was at that meeting opposed to those minutes? Great, thank you. So the next item on the agenda would be to officially elect Marcy LaLiberty as our secretary. Would somebody like to make a motion that we accept her as a secretary?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept Marcy as our secretary.
Anybody want to second that?
Second.
Grosvenor? All those in favor? Anybody opposed to that? All right, congratulations on our new secretary.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
All right, so on the next on my list is kind of an opening statement for me. But before we do that, I'd like to go around the room and just have everybody introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about you, and maybe a little history with the town or something like that. So why don't we start down here with Mr. Grosvenor Newcomb?
Yes, Rob Newcomb, I've lived in town about 34 years. Quite a while back, I served on the planning board for 9 years, and I served on the budget committee for 3 years. My occupation has been a little bit related to what's going on as a carpenter, all my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Grosvenor. Bob LaLiberty.
Let me see, Marcy's my wife, by the way. Marcy and I have lived in town now for about 22 years, but we've owned land here for 32. We used to come up in the early years just for weekends and skiing and that kind of stuff, and the lake use. My background, I really haven't been involved in town offices at all. This is really the first time I've been on a committee this way. However, I've been on the board of directors of the Project Management Institute for 2 cycles, so about 5 years in total. I'm no longer a member of that board, but I was. I'm a mechanical engineer by education and by profession. I actually help design organizations, so I'm essentially an organization design person. So I shifted from mechanical engineering to organization design instead, and did both for about 20 years.
Thanks, Bob. Yep. Lori?
I'm Lori Cahoon. I have lived here in the town of Sebago for 14 years. My family is the 4th generation in our same house in East Sebago. So I've been coming to East Sebago since before I have memories. I am a former EMT and professional firefighter, and then kind of changed careers and became a registered nurse. My only political affiliations were back in college and high school.
Thank you. I'm Barry Jordan. I've lived in Sebago for 45 years in the same home. My wife grew up 2 houses down. She's been in Sebago 68 years. Over the years, I've been very active in the town of Sebago through being the rescue chief, fire chief for almost 10 years, president of the Baseball Association, built an athletic field, been on the finance committee, on the CHIP committee, and currently the commissioner for all New England for all Babe Ruth baseball. So I've been community orientated pretty much my whole life. Brandon?
Wow. I'm Brandon Woolley, I'm the town's code officer and town planner. I don't live in Sebago, I live in Baldwin. My life basically started 12 years ago. I'm a professional sheep shearer, a professional ski instructor, and a code officer. And if you'd like to know more about my life 12 years prior, we can talk about it.
Thank you, Brandon. Dave?
My name's Dave McCarthy. I've lived in Sebago about 34 years, been coming here since 1963. Been involved in the town for a long time, spent, I don't know, maybe 12 years on the budget committee. Been a selectman, been president of the Youth Athletic Association. Done a lot of volunteering. I'm actually on the appeals board now. Enjoy my town, enjoy the people, and I'm glad to be serving on this committee.
Thank you.
Paul White, I've been on planning board for probably 20 years in town, all my life, and I worked on the original comprehensive plan and done some other committee work.
Great. So just a couple of things on my opening, before we go into some public comment. I believe Marcy brought a copy of the moratorium that she could read for us.
Yes, I got it from Desiree.
Okay.
Town of Sebago moratorium, prohibition on new mines, gravel pits, and quarries within village district of the town. You want me to read it verbatim?
Yeah, why don't you, then we can have,
Okay.
make sure we all have the same understanding on it.
Okay. Whereas the town of Sebago has previously created a village district in an effort to preserve its rural character. And whereas the creation of the village district has allowed the town to meet goals for new development in conformation with the character of the village district. And whereas a significant portion of undeveloped lands are located within village district in the town of Sebago. And whereas a large-scale commercial quarry on a 200-acre lot has been proposed for the village district. And whereas the town's current land use ordinance does not adequately address and regulate the location and manner of mining, quarrying, and extractive industries. And whereas, although the town has enacted specific regulatory ordinances governing such matters as cemeteries, dogs, fireworks, parking, and streetlights, it has not enacted a specific ordinance regulating the nature, scope, and manner of mining, quarrying, and extraction industries. And whereas the lack of adequate land use provisions and town regulations poses substantial and adverse burdens upon the community from future mining, quarrying, and extraction within the village district, including, but not limited to, possible groundwater contamination, heavy truck traffic which may damage roads, noise and vibrations from possible blasting and from trucks passing through the town, dust rising from mining, quarrying, or extractive operations, and disruption to adjacent neighbors and abutters due to unregulated hours of operation. Whereas, within proper control and regulation, these and other possible adverse effects will unduly burden the town and its public facilities and resources. And whereas, the town requires 180 days for town staff to fully develop, draft, review, and propose necessary amendments to the town's land use ordinance, and to draft, develop, and propose a comprehensive regulatory ordinance to address the effects of mining, quarrying, and extraction industries within the village district specifically and elsewhere in town. And whereas, in the judgment of the town of Sebago Board of Selectmen, these facts and conclusions outlined above create an emergency within the meaning of 30-AMRS 4356, parentheses 1, and require the following moratorium as immediately necessary for the preservation of the public health, safety, and welfare. Now, therefore, be it ordered that the town enacts the following emergency moratorium to take effect immediately upon approval by the town at special meeting. Number 1, findings. The town has consulted with its manager as well as the code enforcement officer and has determined that mining, quarrying, and extractive industries are currently allowed in the town's village district. The town finds that existing land use regulations governing extractive industries like mining, quarrying, and gravel pits is inadequate and insufficient to protect the village district from the adverse effects of such operations. As a result, the location, scope, and scale of such extraction activity is not adequately regulated or controlled. In particular, there are no limits to the land area that can be mined, quarried, or used for extraction of resources. There are no limits on the depth of such mining, quarrying, or extraction. The hours of operation for such activities is not set or limited. There is no regulation or limits on mining or quarrying blasting. There are no route or weight limits on the trucks which may be traveling through town, and there is no means to assure protection of groundwater from contamination. The town also finds that it needs specific regulations addressing the impacts of extraction industries. Number 2, moratorium, except for those individuals, parties, entities, businesses, or operations who are conducting resource removal from mining, quarrying, or excavation in the town as of November 2nd, 2021, no new mines, quarries, gravel pits, or other extractive industry, business or operations of any kind, including but not limited to those that extract earth, rock, minerals, oils, ores, sand, or gravel, shall be permitted, allowed, or authorized in the village district of the town of Sebago. The town expressly intends that this moratorium apply to any and all pending proceedings, applications, licenses, and permits filed with or requested from the town or with any town agency, body, board, or commission between January 1, 2021 and this date notwithstanding. 1 MRS Section 302. Number 3, existing businesses or operations. Any person, entity, business, or operation that has been conducting mining, quarrying, gravel removal, or other extractive removal of earth, rocks, minerals, ores, sand, gravel, or other resources within the village district prior to November 2nd, 2021, may not in any means, manner, or fashion expand, enlarge, or alter its operations or undertakings for 180 days. Number 4, the scope of moratorium. This moratorium is intended to apply to any person, entity, operation, or business that will mine, quarry, or extract and remove earth, sand, gravel, minerals, ores, rock, or other resources and materials from under the surface of the earth within the village district, or which will otherwise extract and remove earth, sand, gravel, rock, minerals, or other resources or materials through surface removal and mining within the village district. Number 5, duration. This emergency ordinance shall expire in 180 days from the date of its approval. However, the town reserves its rights to reenact this emergency ordinance for an additional 180 days prior to its terminations if the emergency continues. Be it further ordered that to the extent any provision of this moratorium is deemed invalid by a court of competent jurisdiction, the balance of the moratorium that shall remain shall be considered valid. And be it further ordered that this moratorium be considered for final adoption and approval by the town at a special town meeting November 23rd, 2021. Be it further ordered that this moratorium take effect immediately upon passage if approved at town vote, and that it be applied retroactively to January 1, 2021. As voted by the Select Board the 2nd day of November, 2021. And it's signed by the Select Board, Charles Frechette, Tim Mayberry, Chris Parker, Ian Farley, Phil Lowe, attest, Michelle Bukovics, and Maureen Scallon, the town clerk.
Thank you. So, as we all know, there's been two sides of the whole issue as to does our comprehensive plan and land use ordinances already cover quarries, sand and gravel permits? And some say it doesn't. So I think that's why we need to clarify some of the language in our ordinances and in our comprehensive plan. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I found in the comp plan and the land use plan. And as we dig deeper into this, we may find more. However, we should make sure that we're really only reviewing sand and gravel pits and quarries. We're not trying to rewrite the whole comprehensive plan and the whole land use plan. We need to stick focused as a committee on this one issue. So the first thing that I'd point out is that the comprehensive plan was adopted at the town meeting on June 3rd, 2006. So yes, it's getting up there in age. However, until it's replaced or revised, that is our comprehensive plan. There's no expiration date on it. On page 1 of the comprehensive plan, there's a section that says Sebago residents see the protection of natural resources and rural character to be a paramount concern. And then it goes on to say they would like to see change occur in their own town at a slow to moderate rate, with any new development be similar in scale to the character to what currently exists. Tourist-related businesses and seasonal year-round residents are the major land uses in Sebago. It is a goal of the community to retain that mix. On page 27 of the comprehensive plan, It lists the village district, and there's several things listed in there. I just wanted to bullet point a couple of them. Is to allow a range of residential, home occupation, small-scale commercial, public, and institutional uses. Does not allow large-scale commercial businesses, small scale. It also restricts incompatible uses in the primarily residential neighborhoods. Such uses include activities which generate traffic and noise greater than that associated with residential neighborhoods. Those are restricted in the comprehensive plan. So they're coming out right out and saying they don't want any businesses that create noise or any activity, traffic, more than what's associated with a normal residential neighborhood. So then when you skip ahead to the land use, page 1.1, number C, there's a couple of sentences in there that's to promote the health and safety and general welfare of the residents of the community, to encourage the most appropriate use of land throughout the community, and number 8 is to conserve natural resources. That's in our land use. Number E, whenever a provision of this ordinance conflicts or is inconsistent with other provisions of this ordinance or any other ordinance, regulation, or statute, the more restrictive provision shall control. And the word shall is a very huge word when you're writing a rule or an ordinance. It doesn't say, in my opinion, it could, maybe wouldn't, maybe would. Shall means that's the way it is, has to be. So the word shall is put in there for a very specific reason, to make it very clear there's no option to that rule. 4.2, number D, use substantially similar to any listed or prohibited use on the schedule of uses shall be prohibited. So there is a whole list of prohibited usage, and perhaps we need to add that quarries to that use list. It doesn't specifically say quarries in it, but maybe we need to add that to it. 4.9 is where I said that
Slow down,
prohibited
Harry.
usage.
Slow down.
Yep, that's okay. 4.9 on page 4.9 is where I said just add, perhaps, add quarries to that list. And there could be some other things that we find we need to add to it as well. I skipped ahead then to 5.10, and at 5.10, industrial performance standards. B has to do with vibrations, and again, I think this is to protect the village districts. With the exception necessary involved in the construction or demolition of buildings, no vibration shall be transmitted outside the lot where it originates. Blastings of vibration, rock hammers, crushers, even excavators, things like that cause vibration. And then number D on that, offensive noises shall not be permitted beyond the lot lines as to cause a disturbance to neighboring residential properties. Those are two, I think, very important items that would cause a quarry not to be allowed in the village district, simply because they can't contain the vibration on their own property, and they certainly can't contain noises on their own property. But again, I think Brandon has made a couple of statements that there's really not a lot in here to prevent a quarry in the village. And some people disagree with that, which is great. But I think what maybe Brandon can help out the most of this committee, and perhaps even Paul, is fast forward a year ahead from now. And XYZ company comes into the town and said, hey, I'd like to buy 100 acres on Jim Shaw Hill and put a quarry in. You should be very easily be able to answer that question Nope, you can't do it. Why is that, Mr. Brandon? Because of our ordinance, this, and this. Lay it right out, very specific, why that applicant cannot do that. It's not in there right now. And that's what I believe this committee is supposed to try to do, is upgrade, review our ordinances to reflect what the town really wants to have happen. The only other comment that I'll have is I printed out this sheet, if you wanna take one and pass it down. This sheet was provided to me from Joe Manson. It's a graph of the value of real estate near quarries and how they depreciate property. This is just one example from one assessor for one quarry. It's not for Sebagos. But if you look at it, if you're 0 to a half a mile, you're in between 30 and 35% depreciation of your property value. And that goes all the way out to 3 miles to only 5% devaluation. So the question that we have to ask ourselves as a committee, we should have an expert come in and give us what it would do for the town of Sebago. And if, in his view, if you're a mile away or 2 miles away, you're gonna see a depreciation of the value of your home, then we should extend the zone for no quarries within 1 mile or 2 miles of a residential zone. I actually talked to Mike over at O'Donnell & Associates for an hour and a half about 3 weeks ago. And he told me that East Sebago is a middle-class neighborhood that would be devalued to a low-class neighborhood if a quarry was put in the East Sebago Village District. Well, I heard that it wouldn't impact value at all from some people. So I think we need to have our town assessor come into this committee, tell us what exactly he feels would happen to the value of the property in our town, and then we could set our ordinances according to his recommendation. Because I don't feel that we should allow a quarry anywhere in town if we're gonna ask a resident of our town to have a depreciation of value of any amount. Maybe the guy who lives a half a mile would lose 200,000, but you're 3 miles, you might only lose 25,000. Well, that's not really acceptable to you either. So I think before we can start adding things to our ordinances, we need to find out from a professional exactly what impact something like this would have. So that's my opening statement. Thank you for listening. At this point, I have on the agenda to receive any public comments that would be wanted to be given.
Could we maybe slow down a bit?
Sure,
Because
absolutely.
you offered an awful lot of information.
I know.
In your opening comments, and I think there's a few things that probably should be brought up.
Okay.
You know, you mentioned a lot of specifics about vibration and noise and real estate values. And you mentioned that there ought to have been a study. You mentioned Mike O'Donnell. Well, we talked to the John O'Donnell, you know. The point that I'd like to make is you drew specifics, conclusions that this quarry couldn't meet standards, couldn't meet the vibration requirements, and couldn't meet the sound requirements. This process started, 5 months ago with the pre-application meeting. The application was submitted, there was a public hearing, and then two review meetings since. So this has been going on for close to 6 months. I actually started to get phone calls before the pre-application meeting. The word had gotten out, and I got phone calls from some of the neighborhood members wanting to know what was going on and
I was one of them.
what I knew about it. And I said, well, I don't have an application, but, you know, currently, right now, it's allowed under our ordinances. Since that time, we've had a lot of conclusions drawn, and to date, not one person from the public or the committee or the citizens committee, not one single person has come in to look at any of the information. Not one person has looked at any of the sound level studies, any of the vibration studies. Not one person is asked to look at Title 38, the review criteria required by the DEP. Not one person has looked at the plans, looked at the, you know, the scale drawing. Actually, one person.
One
did.
person has, Brandon, that's right.
But I didn't know about it until just the other day when you came. I wasn't there when you came in. So one person has, but not one person from the committee. In my knowledge, I don't know who you shared the information with, but that was just a recent occurrence. Throughout this entire review process, nobody has asked to look at any of the stuff.
Well, I don't want you to be confused.
I didn't
with-
interrupt you.
Okay, I was just making a point. You're confusing this particular project that's in process with what this committee is supposed to be doing. We're looking at our ordinances to revise them, not scrutinize existing permits. So the fact of what you're saying has absolutely nothing to do with what the committee's supposed to do. It's to review the ordinances that we have, update them where we feel necessary to prevent quarries in the village district, and not address the concerns that people may have about the existing permits.
Okay.
So just don't get straight away to that permit, because this has nothing to do with that applicant or that permit.
Okay, so it has only to do with the village district inquiries.
Well, that's what the mission of this committee is, yes.
Okay, so you realize there are other village districts.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So are you proposing that we not allow quarry in just this village district?
No, we're addressing the village districts within the town of Sebago.
All villages?
All village districts in the town of Sebago.
Okay, so you're not suggesting maybe a redistricting of the village district?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you did a lot of research, you read excerpts from the comprehensive plan and from the land use. Could you define?
As I get through.
Hmm?
Go ahead.
Could you define rural residential?
We actually have a zone in rural residential.
Right.
It shows on our map. And so the other issue the committee will have to look at is, do we want to include rural residential in our recommendations to the town? And that's something the committee can decide to do, or do we want to just strictly deal with residential?
Well, we don't have a residential district. We only have one rural district, well, excuse me, residential. We have rural residential, we have village,
Right.
we have rural residential, and we have rural.
Right. Yep.
Okay,
So we're dealing with the village district right now, and the question becomes, do we want to address concerns for the rural residential?
okay, well, I'm trying to, you know, to lay something out for you,
Okay,
okay?
yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, I want you to realize, you know, what you're up against. We can't just go through the comprehensive plan and the land use and just pick out sentences and paragraphs that support your position. Now, don't interrupt me again, because every time you interrupt me, I lose my train of thought. Okay, so we have 3 districts, and basically, the village district is a combination of residential, light commercial, and industrial use. And the comprehensive plan also has identified village areas, and specifically East Sebago is the area where they would like to contain those types of activities. Now, rural residential, the only one that contains the word residential, rural residential is for single-family dwellings and some home occupations. And we're talking about, you know, if you're an accountant or a tax guy or a massage therapist, whatever. You know, it's small businesses, home occupations with no employees. In the rural district, it's single family duplexes, multifamily dwellings, residential dwellings, agriculture, timber harvesting. It does allow mineral extraction and gravel pits.
And we actually have one in that district, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. All right, so now, if you go back to the meeting the other night we had, there was a gentleman that stood up and said he was on the comprehensive plan 20 years ago when we drafted the comprehensive plan. And he remembers well that lot, map 2, lot 9. And it was the intention of the comprehensive plan review committee that lot be used strictly for residential use and nothing else, residential use. Now, if that was to be used for only residential use, it would have been in rural residential, not in village, because village allows for commercial and industrial uses. If it had been their intention to be only used for residential, it would have been in rural residential. Furthermore, if he was adamant that it had been identified as only suitable for residential use. If you look at our maps, we have a series of maps that were generated by the comprehensive plan. One of them was the constraints and opportunities map. There's also a soils map, and there's also a slopes map in there. And the conclusion of those maps is that lot, that map 2, lot 9, had soils that were marginally suitable for subsurface waste systems, and most of that was unsuitable for subsurface systems, and that the majority of that lot had slopes greater than 15 to 25%. Now those are unsuitable for residential development. The only part of that lot that's suitable for residential development is the very top of the hill, which is over 2,000 feet from any access. So by our ordinance, it couldn't be developed. It's too far and it's too steep, because we also have very restrictive road standards in our ordinance that wouldn't allow a road to be put in up over that slope because it's too steep. So basically, this particular lot is unsuitable for residential development. That doesn't leave a lot of options for this particular lot. Now, I'm just trying to point out to you what hurdles you're going to have to climb over in order to come up with an ordinance or any kind of law that would stand up if it was challenged.
Brandon, just to clarify one of your statements, is the lot you're talking about at the applicant's lot?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Well, let's not ignore, what we're talking about. We're talking about one specific project.
Okay.
Now, you may quite likely meet some opposition if you try to impose a restriction in all village districts. Because, there are other activities in this town within the village district. There are other similar activities. There isn't. So, if you try to eliminate, any possibility of an extraction activity in that district, you're going to be infringing on other properties. So I just want to make that clear.
What other quarries do we have in the village districts that are ongoing right now?
Well, ongoing now, but in that, actually, there was a good sized, what was it, Shaw Brothers pit, I think was largely played, down beyond the mill pond.
Well, right.
And then within the confines of that lot, there was a smaller cutout lot that is a gravel pit. So.
Right.
But not
I
a
don't
quarry though, right?
Well,
Gravel pit.
I'm not,
The law doesn't really distinguish between the removal of stone as in quarry and the removal of gravel, although there's a practical difference. There doesn't seem to be a legal one. They don't draw a legal distinction between the two that I've noticed.
So, I have a question.
so,
Based on the information that you have provided, I'm not sure, just to clarify, so that I have a proper understanding. Are you saying that currently, because of the fact that the village districts, which we are supposed to be working on the ordinances for, because they have commercial or industrial, then what we would need to do ordinance-wise would be to clarify specifically what type of commercial or industrial businesses could occur in a village district?
Right, I'm talking about possible need for redistricting or re-identifying our districts.
And how would we go about doing that?
Well, you'd have to go and address the comprehensive plan. You know, any redistricting would, you know, that's another matter. I mean, you can't, like I said, you know, there are other village districts in town. And I'm not gonna tell you that, you know, well, somebody in this particular district on this particular lot might be anticipating something, but, you know, they're very concerned.
Right, no, I understand that respectfully, you know, I was just, I mean, you've given us a valid piece of information, I believe. And so, it's my understanding that you're relatively well-versed in this, so you could direct us in a path that would be able to make the ordinances more clear?
Well, I'm trying.
Well, that's kind of why I said at the beginning, that he needs to tell us, as the code enforcement officer, if somebody comes to us next year for a quarry in the village district, or maybe even rural residential,
So,
that you can give them a definitive, no, you can't do it, and this is why. And as far as trying to change the districting in the town, you know, or the zoning, I don't think that's something that this committee should go down that path, and I don't think that it's not in the directive that we do that. It's to review the ordinances that we have and the comprehensive plan, revise them where needed, mostly based on public input.
Okay.
What does the people in the town want?
all right,
Not what
that's,
Barry wants or Brandon wants. So,
okay, so you've got two options. You can either look at our comprehensive plan, look at all our districts, redistrict, rename, re-identify what's allowed in those districts. Or, if you prefer, to just ignore all of that and just address a quarry ordinance. If you want to address a quarry ordinance, that ordinance is going to have to be a town-wide ordinance.
Adopted by the
Yep.
town.
That, a town, yeah, all right, so it should,
Go ahead.
it just so happens, it just so happens,
you have one.
in my spare time,
I was gonna say, at some point, we dealt with the specific problem of the existence of certain operations already in town at the time we did the ordinance, and that included the fact that there were quarries going on in the village district of East Sebago. That was just a fact. So at the time, we included that as part of what was going on there.
so what I'm suggesting is, you know, if you wanna just address strictly the quarry ordinance, now this is just a stab at it, and this is just a, you know, very preliminary proposal.
We have a lot of work to do, so yeah.
You know, you
Chit-chat.
can look at this, but keep in mind that without redistricting and re-identifying the allowable uses in districts, this is gonna have to cover everybody who wants to engage in an extraction industry. So you might wanna read through this, just take a minute, read through it before you comment and before you throw stones at it.
You just created this as an example for us, as a model that you think would work. Yes?
Oh, did you write this, or?
I didn't write this, no, this was a collaboration, I've had some input into this. I write a lot of this stuff, but, you know,
And this would be a town-wide
yes.
ordinance.
And this, you know, again, this is first step. You know, this is something you should.
Well, the town of Baldwin has a sand and gravel quarry ordinance. There it is. it's kind of similar to this, I haven't read it word for word.
The town of Alden,
I think,
their extraction ordinance is not unsimilar to this Maine Aggregate Association's draft ordinance, which is verbatim Title 38, and this is what the Sebago Planning Board uses as a reference for standards. So we use Title 38, very similar and almost verbatim to this draft ordinance, and Baldwin, you know, was kind of along those lines as far as those review criteria, but Baldwin has placed some additional dimensional requirements on setbacks, which pretty much exclude any possibility of any extraction in Baldwin.
so what's your thought, Brandon, on, somebody that already owns a pit for gravel extraction, and they own the land beside it, or let's say you own a gravel pit, and I own the land beside it, and I buy your pit from you, and now I want to expand that pit to include my land, whether it be for quarry or gravel or whatever. Should somehow we put in our ordinances that there be no expansion of existing pits, quarries, gravel pits and quarries beyond the scope of their initial permitted use to prevent somebody from doing that? Just throwing that out there.
Well, you've asked me a question. You can't put those kind of restrictions on Southern Company. You know, that would be in essence, you know, doing a taking away their lands. That would be an infringement on their constitutional rights to utilize their land. You can impose limits, and if you read this, if you take a minute
Yeah, I did.
to read.
The 15,000 yards a year.
Right, 15,000 cubic yards. All right, now, so that, the reason we came up with 15,000 cubic yards is I would probably recommend you increase that a little bit, because 15,000 cubic yards is incredibly conservative. You know, I just did some math here. 1 acre at 10 foot depth would be 16,200 cubic yards. That's just 1 acre of and 10 foot of depth. Now there are, I hate to name anybody, but there's an operating quarry right now that has been increasing their production every year for several years. You know, they've increased by 1,000 or 2,000 cubic yards per year. So, you know, and if, you know, they're currently producing about 15,000 cubic yards. You know, if we capped it at 15,000 cubic yards, that would be not allowing them to expand or to meet the current market demand. So, you know, we have to be able to allow people to expand their businesses and at least meet the demand. You know? So
How would you monitor that they hit the 15,000 or whatever the threshold is, short of having a 10 by 10 camp down there and hiring an employee to work there 24/7 to monitor what comes out of it? How would you monitor that, I guess is,
well,
I mean,
the ordinance also calls for an annual review and an annual license, you know, renewable license every year. So
I would almost think that it would be an almost impossible chore to say to anybody, well, you've hit your 15,000 and you're done for the year. It's January 30th, but you're done.
I don't know why that would be impossible, but,
Okay, I'm just throwing it out.
to your question to Brandon, I would think that if somebody brings another piece of property into a gravel pit, that goes through the entire process all over again.
Mhm.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so,
Okay. The only reason I brought that up is because, over on Sheep Mountain, there is a 5-acre piece of land already being used as a gravel pit. And if that was to be purchased by whoever owns Sheep Mountain, could they automatically expand that gravel pit to include additional 200 acres should they so want to?
No,
But no, not without going through
they would have to go back to the review process. Right now, we have a limit to the size. You know, That gravel pit that's there is not a 5 acre pit, he owns 5
You only
acres.
say 5 acres, we only got, what, maybe a half acre at most?
Maybe,
Maybe.
yeah.
I was just throwing that out there that, because I don't know how that would work.
Right, well, you wanna avoid singling out one entity, you know,
Well,
and, you know, and putting restrictions on their development, you know, this has, if you're gonna do this town-wide quarry ordinance, it's gotta be town-wide.
Right.
And it has to affect not just new quarries, but existing quarries. We're talking about imposing new regulations. So what I'm suggesting here, you're not gonna like this, I'm suggesting compromise, you know?
Well, I think part of our mission is to make recommendations to our zoning and comprehensive plan based on public input and public opinion and what's the town wanna do. And so far, it's very clear to me that the town doesn't want quarries, certainly in the village district, so, to compromise and allow a certain amount, I don't think that's what the people in this community want, by an overwhelming majority of people, so, you know, this committee needs to take into consideration what the town wants, not just what maybe you or me or Lori or anybody else really feels about it. But I'm sure as we get going through this committee, we'll expose different things and come up with different ideas, and the end result may be different than what any one of us feel tonight about it, one way or the other. But I would like to also say that we're a committee, and that no one person, myself included, or Brandon, or Paul, or Dave, nobody here has any more opinion or more voice than somebody else on the committee. We're all here on this committee to work in the best interest of the community and the people in the town at their directive. And that's one reason why that we're so open to the public for this meeting, so. But you made some good points, Brandon, and I think the committee needs to.
I would
certainly
be,
hear those.
if anybody wants a copy of Title 38 or the draft ordinance, if you wanna go through that design criteria, and I would urge, anybody to come in and look at some of the studies that were done. You know, I wasn't allowed to answer a question the other night at that public hearing. I was asked a direct question about whether or not there had been a noise study done. And then I was asked, well, who paid for it? And there was an uproar. You know, there was a lot of heckling going on, and I just shut my mouth. And I was waiting for everybody to calm down, and it just went on. Had it been allowed to continue, I would have suggested that somebody come in and read some of the studies and read some of the information that's been presented. You know, yes, Gorham Sand and Gravel, when I answered the question, Gorham Sand and Gravel paid for the study. But any applicant pays for all of these studies. They pay for every one of them. They're directed
Part of the
by,
permit process, right?
they're directed by the board. The board requests the studies and the applicant must pay for them. It is the board's discretion to require a review of that, peer review. They may, you know, when we're talking noise studies, and those are actual measurements, and there are limits and there are restrictions, there are laws that have to be met. So when an applicant, when the DEP sets limits at, say, 65 decibels, and then you have a noise study done when the decibel level of the machinery is actually measured, and then of course there has to be modeling done to project those noise levels to certain distances. You can't measure something that doesn't exist yet, but there's modeling done. Now those are standards that are set, and the models are set. Now we could have asked for another company to come in and do the same noise study. Traffic studies, the traffic count is done by the state, the DOT. So we asked for a traffic study, just for information, I'm not supporting one side or the other, but just for your information, just to illustrate what kind of information is out there. There's, the state puts up traffic counters on Route 114. Do you know what the traffic count, the truck traffic is on Route 114 through Long Beach? Do you have any idea? There's 111,000 trucks annually that cross up through that area, 111,000. So, Gorham saying, they're proposing 7,000 trucks. Now, keep in mind, only less than half of them are going down 114. Well, at 111,000, it's like 1.5% increase. Now, again, I'm not supporting Gorham Sand and Gravel, I'm not on either side, but I am on the side of facts. I'm on the side of facts and information and doing your due diligence and actually looking at the study. So I'm inviting anybody to come into my office, look at this stuff.
I'll make a point of doing that.
If you want copies, I've got Baldwin's ordinance here, I've got the draft ordinance, I've got Title 38, anybody wants a copy. I didn't make copies for everybody because it would have taken a whole ream of paper. So, but if you want them, just let me know, I'll make copies of all of this information.
Would you please have those for the next meeting for us all?
If everybody wants them, sure, I'll make copies.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
I would look for
So,
copy.
I have a question, Brandon. Was there a road study done on Route 11? Because my understanding there hasn't been one in a significant amount of time.
On Route 11, I don't know if there's been a count done on Route 11, honestly, I don't know. We were, there was so much interest in Route 114 and Long Beach and the school.
Right, no,
That-
I
that was-
understand
that
that, I
was
was
the
just
focus.
curious.
And I think there was probably more traffic on 114 than on Route
Dave,
11.
you had a,
Well, Grove would
No, you
have,
go ahead, you and your hand up.
well, thank you for all that, Brandon, and yeah, that information would be great to have. I would like to kind of not focus on what precipitated this moratorium and one particular project and move on to how we're going to proceed. Not to justify anybody's actions or decisions on that
right.
project.
Well, I do think a decision needs to be made though, because you just said, what direction are we gonna go? Are we gonna go a standalone ordinance, or are we gonna start looking deeper?
Well, in my opinion, I don't think nobody's delved into the comprehensive plan yet and enough as a committee to see exactly what it's going to take and what's gonna happen if we adjust this, change this, what's that gonna affect?
Right.
So, I like your idea of a townwide ordinance, to me that makes sense, but.
Okay. Thank you, Brandon.
Yes, you don't specifically address the, zones, do you, in the ordinance?
No, because actually, if you look at the use tables, any kind of extraction industry, is actually allowable in any of the districts. So,
I don't see though that making the adjustment to say that 15, 16 years down the line, we decided that, in one category of activity, mining, we decided that it might not be appropriate in village district. I don't think that's particularly,
well, that kind of,
earth-shattering in terms of the entirety of the comprehensive plan.
it kind of speaks to the importance of really examining the comprehensive plan, because, the first thing you do with a comprehensive plan is you do an inventory, of the current situation in the town. In the last inventory, in the last comprehensive plan, there was very little mention made of extraction industry. They did mention it. They just said, well, there is an extraction business currently, and no expansion in the foreseeable future or something, or need for extraction. Well, that's out of date.
Yeah.
Because.
No one would disagree with that, I don't think.
Because everybody evolves, people, towns grow. Towns grow, our population has increased by 25% or more since the last comprehensive plan. So,
So
and
Brandon, I apologize for interrupting, I'm sorry. So, I guess, what I'm trying to hear from you, and I'm trying really hard to be unbiased here. What I'm hearing from you is that you feel as though working on the ordinances, if they are specifically targeting one company, then they need to be more expansive. Is that- Now, if we developed an ordinance for blasting, for example, that wouldn't specifically be related to one company, right? Because we have blasting
Well,
throughout.
well,
I mean, because we don't have a blasting ordinances or?
Well,
that would be tough to deal with and regulate. There are state regulations that address blasting, there's a lot more blasting that occurs than you might realize. Anytime, anytime somebody puts in a foundation, right now, we have so much bedrock, exposed bedrock in town, you never know where you're gonna have a requirement to have some blasting.
So if we had like an ordinance that specifically addressed blasting, and, well, not even just mining, but blasting in general, and like, at what point you would be required to obtain a permit, or things like that, and maybe put some specifics in, because my understanding is that you're looking for a compromise, but my understanding of our position is that we're supposed to work on ordinances. And so if we specified things like, if we had a blasting ordinance, if we had, permit requirements, if we had, if we had enforcement fees, things like that, could protect us moving forward.
Maybe, one second, Joe. I don't wanna lose this thought, bypass this. Maybe we might be able to regulate blasting if we set some volume limits or some threshold. Because, if we say, okay, you need a permit, if the blasting is gonna involve more than 100 cubic yards of material. Because, anything less than that would just be a nightmare, administrative nightmare to deal with. Because we never know with blasting. They blast to put in the telephone pole,
But we could require it though, right? Like as a town,
Well,
we could require something.
and somebody's, maybe a notification, maybe a requirement for a notification, but we don't have the manpower to go oversee, every time somebody, cracks a rock to put in a telephone pole or does a blast to doing a water line or
If they
foundation.
obtained a permit for a period of time or something like that, that would,
Well, like I said, a threshold,
Right.
say if you're gonna, if you wanna require a permit, but if you issue a permit for mineral extraction, then you shouldn't need a blasting permit, because that's regulated, that's part of the licensing that's overseen by the state, so.
well,
Go ahead, Greg.
Go ahead, sorry.
well, I just wanna address, I will address the blasting that you guys mentioned. I found a place in the comprehensive plans or in the codes that said, yeah, it was okay to blast for his private, enterprise, houses, telephone poles that he mentioned. But to get back to the subject at hand, I kinda gotta agree with Dave, and, at the end of our last meeting, Dave mentioned that we should read the comprehensive plan and the ordinances, and I ran through them. And, I can list stuff here, where the planning board might have missed, or Joe Gotts might have missed, but that's not what we're here for. We're not here to review the application of what's going on. We're here to do what Article 2 says of this warrant. And how we go about it, we have an existing comprehensive plan. Barry mentioned a few of those items when we started. And I have 2 or 3 check marks that I also saw the same things.
Why don't you, go through them and highlight them out for us, Groveman?
Okay, well, you said in the 3rd paragraph, page 1, that was the one I had written down also.
Page 1 of 1.
Yeah, and page 2, the last paragraph, was one of mine.
Hang on.
Which one on page 2, I'm sorry? Did you say the last row? On page 2?
Yeah, maybe, I got down to the first. The last paragraph on page 2.
Okay, thank you.
Is that in the comprehensive plan or the land use?
That's in the comprehensive plan.
That's why I'm not.
And some of these are just
Got it as
raw
well, yeah.
summaries, if you will.
So I have, I've done exactly the same thing, and I have lots of other supporting kinds of things that I've underlined in all of these, and actually, in reading them all, I saw plenty of, the commentary, certainly in the comprehensive plan,
Right.
that supported, not doing mining
Yeah,
in the
Yes,
village district, for
safe.
sure, in various areas, so that's there, and also in the ordinances, I found a whole number of different areas, and I'd be happy to itemize all those, I just have those tabs on, it'll take me a
Yeah,
little
we
while.
should highlight those.
I can certainly do those, yeah.
you want me to go through more?
Yeah, go through what you came up with, and then we'll do what Bob's come up with, and then,
Okay, page 6. These are just sentences in here toward the bottom of the page. Promote a safe, healthy, and protected environment in which to work, live, and create. The next one down is assist in the preservation and efficient use of the region's natural resources as to ensure their availability for future generations. The second to the last one is work to improve the conditions of the region's highways, transportation facilities in terms of safety capacity. I'm just gonna make a comment about the roads, the state roads, particularly in our town. The town is doing a better job on doing their roads than the state is. We all know on Route 11, Route 114, in Sebago anyway, except for a few sections, they do what I call a cover-up. And as we know, the pavement breaks down. Page 18. Number 2, on the left column. Encourage small-scale businesses that serve the needs of local residents. And then B, regulation for small service businesses.
Can I add something, Greg?
Yeah,
I actually had, number 1 circled as well,
natural environment.
which is protecting the quality of the natural environment of Sebago in order to maintain its role as a desirable vacation destination.
Yep.
I mean, this is gonna be visible as heck to the community.
Page 27B. Under village district strategies. At the bottom, second last sentence, restrict incompatible uses in the primarily residential neighborhoods. Such uses include activities which generate traffic and noise greater than associated with residential neighborhoods. Village district.
So, Grosvenor, to what Brandon was saying, is that this says residential neighborhoods, not village neighborhoods, even though there's residences in the village. But there's also small commercial.
Right.
So, just a thought, perhaps we have to add to this section to include village districts, okay? Because that could be one of the areas that is a little bit gray,
Yeah,
right? I mean, you said you got residential and you got village.
Well,
And-
you know, that's an age-old question the courts battle with
Right.
every day when they, you know, define neighborhoods and how far is a village and when does a village start and when does a rural area,
Right.
you know, begin. And for the most part, they rely on planning boards to make that determination. You know, when defining a neighborhood and what should be included in a neighborhood when they're conducting a review. And we deal with it as well, because when we're talking about variances, when we're talking about maintaining neighborhood character, you know, that there's not just one answer to it.
Right.
You know, that neighborhood doesn't end a quarter of a mile past the last house. You know, that, because you may be already into another neighborhood. So that's really difficult to define. You almost have to define it in every,
Right. Okay.
every scenario.
What else, Grove?
page 30, number 4. Growth monitoring, monitor growth and development, and where necessary, recommend additional ordinances, recommend additional ordinances aimed at guiding growth and control. So that gives us a little bit of a directive.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And then I said at the bottom, it says the second to last sentence under strategies, second column, limits on non-residential development.
Where was that one? Oh, I see.
It's
Yeah.
really-
Page 40. And written down first paragraph, starting with the community. Read that, want me to read it?
Sure.
The community would like to see any further commercial growth occur in areas currently in commercial use according to the 2000 survey of residents. They would like to see future business to be small scale, retail and service concerns, with 75% respondents opposing large scale commercial developments. 76% dislike car dealerships, 90% opposing automobile junkyards. These numbers represent a significant increase from the previous survey.
so grow. I agree with you that these all point to maybe why, maybe you're setting up an appeal for this permit or something, but,
Right,
so these are things that are in there that we would, I think we would keep.
we would keep and work off of.
But, yes, but maybe what you're doing is we need to, anything that, I guess, there is any doubt or has any vague meaning, maybe we each need to go through and come up with, we'll set a section and say, let's go through this. How does this affect the village district? quarries in the town and all this, and is there a loophole there? I don't know how else to begin. I mean, the points you're making are, yeah, I agree, they're all there.
Right, and all I'm trying to say, this is, therefore, I feel, you know, the comprehensive plan is a basis to start with.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely, you know, there are many things in there that are still good and still valid to this day.
Yeah,
I think some
exactly.
things may need tightening up, so.
Yeah.
No,
I don't know, we're just kind of talking here, but I don't see us moving towards,
well, I think talking
Solving it.
amongst ourselves about this stuff kind of sets us in a better sense of direction. So,
Well, we're all talking about scope of work in terms of what we're really trying to get at here.
right.
And how to get started, and that's really what.
Do you have anything else, Grosvenor, or?
Well, I have land use stuff, but I
Okay.
mean, I think that a lot of that land use stuff can be brought up somewhere else.
Okay.
You know, it's. I mean, you brought up, and I had also something you mentioned, Barry. 510, industrial performance, A through D. Want to reread that? Land use.
I actually had a section highlighted, and I'm not sure I can find it quickly enough here, but it specifically states that the land use is tied to the comprehensive plan, and the more stricter of the two shall, not may, be the one that's in use. So I've also heard, it's on page 5.4 at the top, number 7. If you guys wanna go to that, page 5.4. I thought I had it written down, but I didn't.
Is that number 7?
Yes.
Yeah, I had that.
It's
written down.
conformance with the comprehensive plan,
Yeah, well, there's 3 people that see the same thing.
yeah.
My
So
comments
just-
would be the same section.
I think this paragraph, it said shall be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. So the two kind of go together, and the more restrictive one is the one that would apply.
Well, I just want to suggest one thing, because, you know, it may seem like some ambiguities with the ordinance. There are some contradictory, sentences, within the ordinance. Just to give you an example, you look at section 5, it references groundwater studies. Everybody shall do a groundwater study, but it doesn't really quantify that. It just suggests that everybody do a groundwater study. But not until you get into section 7 and you start looking at definitions of differences between minor and a major development, does it actually define what capacity that groundwater study is needed and necessary, and it defines when it should be. But if you're just looking at section 5, you go, well, everybody needs to have a groundwater study, but that's just not true. It depends on section 7. So you really need to read through the entire, again, suggest.
So what the big print giveth over here, the little print taketh away over here?
Pretty much, yeah. Just read the whole thing and don't get stuck in that trap,
Don't stop at that section, say, oh, gotta have it, read the whole thing.
Yes,
Yeah, and
read the whole thing.
okay. I think Bob had a couple of points he wanted to point out.
Well, I really had all the same thing.
Okay,
We wrote that in,
Um,
and probably a few more.
so we kind of got a little bit off, but that's okay. I think we got a lot of information over the last half an hour. But I really have, under the new business, any public comments, that if anybody here would like to bring up a concern or comment, then we're open to those suggestions. If you'd introduce yourself.
Oh, sure. I am Dave Cahoon. I live off of Baldwin Road, Route 11. And I was just wanting to make a suggestion that this committee looks at some of the other town ordinances around excavation with, in regards to groundwater and blasting. Specifically the town of Wyndham and the city of Augusta. And how they've managed to write their ordinances for the operation of a quarry rather than zoning. They're written more specifically towards distance from residents rather than by zone. And they're very specific as far as quantifying vibrations and also specifically with Augusta, how they handle permitting for blasts. Specifically because they've had some issues with past violations, and so they've managed to change their ordinances to try to control that. That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Great,
Thank you. Phil?
Few things. Starting off with a couple of what I call cleanup items or order items for you. You may want to run your committee here. I've noticed several times during this application, prior applications, and already during this committee, that when you're submitted materials during the meeting, it basically stops the meeting. You gotta stop, try to figure out what the heck somebody's handing out to you. Not to say it isn't needed sometimes, but when that happens, the meeting and all productivity stops. Everybody's mind thought gets dumped, and you basically gotta start over, because now you have to read a document amid a meeting. I'm not saying this document isn't good to have or anything like that, and you want members doing research. But if research is gonna be discussed in the meeting, you ought to have it 10 days before the meeting, or give yourself a number, a week before the meeting. I don't care what the number is, but you don't wanna get it at the meeting and then stumble through a meeting, because it adds chaos to the whole meeting. So my recommendation would be you get all submittals in at least a week before the meeting, or you pick a number, I don't care what that is. When you have notes for a meeting, we went through this when I was with Paul on the planning board. It came up whether or not, first of all, that's public information, and when does it become public information? And you may not be subject to right-to-know laws or notices or anything. I'm not sure of that, but you wanna make sure of that. At any rate, if you have minutes and you want to get the word out there right off, that's a good thing to do. All you have to do is have a notation on those meetings that these are preliminary meetings, minutes, and have not been approved by the board or the committee. And you cover yourself and you put that information out there the next day. So that doesn't mean you've gotta hold it up for a whole 2 weeks or a month till the next meeting, and people can't have that. So you can do that, and that's a way to do that, if you choose. In general, when you think of ordinances and quantifying things, and the one that sticks out to me here is 53 decibels of property line. You may have a discussion. You can be more restrictive than state law, not less restrictive in general principle. So if you decide at your property lines in this town, especially in village zone, you want that to be a decibel level of 10, you can do that. You can be more restrictive, but you cannot be, like, say, 75 if the state is saying it's okay to do 53, okay? So I advise you to take the public's input, come to your own conclusions. You may want to be more restrictive on many things, especially with respect to quarries, than other information sources are gonna lead you to believe has to be the way it is. It doesn't have to be that way. You choose your laws in this town. You choose your ordinances. You're gonna submit information to the planning, to the select board, and we're gonna look at them a second time. We should, I hope we read them, if you go through all this work to generate them. And our attorney may come back to us and say, oh, this is no good. And then we're gonna wind up having a public hearing on all of this. Anyway, you may want to have several public hearings, kind of miniature in scope as you go, to
Right, that's
collect information, all good. You know, the more, it takes a lot of time, but getting the information out to people is important, and you can choose your method on that. But we will wind up having a public hearing on all ordinance recommendations prior to the final formulation, if you will, of the warrant items. And then we'll present those at the.
Now, I understand it, Phil, that we're going to, whatever we make a recommendation to do is gonna be presented to the Board of Selectmen, to then be presented to the town's legal counsel to make sure that it's all legal and written up right.
Yep.
And then it's gonna go to some public hearings, what's proposed, and then be voting on a warrant at a town meeting.
There you go.
So whatever we come up with
Right.
can be audited, changed, modified a little here or there, no matter what. We
Well,
just wanna be able to come up with the guidelines from what we feel based on citizen input, we need to do to change things.
Yep. So, you know, this whole gathering of information is a massive concern. How massive and what the scope of this is something you need to work on, and you should, right up front here, as soon as you can, identify exactly what your scope is going to be and do it in written form. That way, everybody's on the same page, information put out there, this is what we're going to address, and maybe you want a legal opinion on that.
Well, further down on the agenda, Phil,
All the good will be.
is to request in writing to the board, an executive session with the town's attorney and the selectmen to
Yep.
get just that very thing.
Well,
To get
this,
out of scope.
let's not forget where this came from, and it's important only in reference, not necessarily going forward. When you establish a committee as a request of a petition, that's not normal proceedings, okay? That only happens when something's out of whack and the group of citizens says, okay, we have to do something outside. And that's what happened here. Now, if we were to come up with that, if you had come to the select board, for example, and say, we want to develop this committee, the select board should have sat down and came up with the charge for the committee. So you would have started already knowing what direction you're going in and what those goals are. Here, it's a little loose, so gathering that is gonna be important to you to survive this whole process. Because if you're just inventing it as you go, it number one, doesn't do anything for your credibility. And number two, it's frustrating for everybody to live through, and all the time gets burned. You gotta, all the way through this thing, you gotta kind of think of this thing as everybody's got willingness to give something in this room, or they wouldn't be here tonight. But that's kind of reserve capital, if you will, volunteer capital, and volunteer capital gets burned out pretty quick if it's not in pretty good order. So getting your order together, getting the housekeeping things done, this is how we're gonna operate, pretty important to do. And I suggest you go away for whatever the next meeting period is, and then come back and try to, number one, put the house in order, and that way everybody will be on the same page. You know, getting even something as simple as this, I can read it, but not everybody can read this and understand on the first read what it says. You know, it's great to look at, but I can give you 3 or 4 things that are totally not here. First of all, under authority, what zone is this for? If you're just gonna limit it to the village zone, then you wanna state that. And that's your mission here, and that really narrows the scope. Now, to say you can't do this without a full rebuild of the comprehensive plan is really not right. Number one, the comprehensive plan is the law of the land until there's another one, okay? So you have a comprehensive plan. It really does a pretty good job of outlining what's expected in the village zone, for example, and you picked out several things here tonight. So but you have, to say you have to reinvent that whole wheel before you can do an ordinance, it's nice if you have a clear slate to start with, sure, you gotta invent the wheel, and then you gotta invent this wheel that is the laws of the land from that. You know, you might decide that for the immediate issues for this committee, that you wanna isolate certain things to work on. Quarries and village district would be a very small box. And you might choose, because it is a choice, to upgrade those particular ordinances to better match the will of the comprehensive plan you have. Now, then when the whole process starts over, that might get massaged some, but you're gonna wind up doing some of that if you do the whole ordinance later anyway. So I think it's a choice at this point, but I would recommend you get a legal opinion on whether you ought to tear everything down and start from scratch right now, or if you ought to try to appease the public a little bit and put this group down and then go back and start right over with a clean slate. Pros and cons both ways probably, but.
I think that when we have that meeting with the attorney, that will help us click down a clearer path.
Yeah, but just as an example, there's nothing in this that says what happens if you do this permit and a year from now they sell it. Does everything survive that sale? Big deal, okay? Because if it doesn't, we're all in trouble. You touched on some things of what to do with existing quarries and stuff. Basically, that's a grandfathering effort. And a lot of stuff winds up being in that box when you're doing something here. If somebody already has a gravel pit in the village zone and you're not gonna have any more, the existing ones are gonna get grandfathered, okay? Now you can put volume restrictions for truck traffic, you can do a whole host of different things in different ways here, okay? But if you narrow the field initially to that, another item that's kind of missing here, I see an annual license, I like that, but that annual license ought to amount to a review of any violations, a review of any calls you've gotten on that project. And I say project because this is all big projects, okay? This isn't, we gotta forget about that one project. That may have been the spark that ignited the fire in this town, but right now, we have an ordinance situation to deal with, and we ought to be doing it with regard to what the public wants and what the comprehensive plan says right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Gina Hook, at the first meeting, it was suggested, as most of you have done, that you review and learn what the comprehensive plan entailed. And members of my family and I have discussed and found many of the statements that some of you were highlighting, that we thought, this is very clear that this should not have been a considered business. But you're getting cautionary statements tonight that you can't cherry pick, you can't just choose those statements, you can't do that. Well, I haven't heard anything said that was, this says it's allowed. So would it be productive for you to have a member or two play devil's advocate and say, you're saying that this says I can't do it, but I'm saying I found this and this says I can. Would that help you define what you have to rewrite or what you have to make clearer?
I think it would.
So if somebody were to play the devil's advocate, and I'm only saying that because you have, I feel, and you seem to be going in that direction and agreeing that you have a specific goal, so it shouldn't be a generalized question. If the specific goal is to cause and put in place limits on that kind of industry, somebody say, this is why I can do it, and the rest of you, or others say, this is why you can't, and then find the medium ground that lets you make it a definitive answer for anyone asking.
Thank you. Anybody else got any? Mark, would you like any comments on it? Okay. Thank you. So on my, the new business, and I really think before the committee starts really diving into a scope of what we're trying to accomplish and what direction we really need to go in, I really think we need to have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the town's attorney for any specific legal questions that we might have. So I'd like a motion on the floor to have the secretary send an official request from this committee to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen requesting an executive session face-to-face with our town's attorney. And that being said, I'd also like everybody on the committee to email me in advance, say within the next 10 days, any questions that you may have for the attorney when we meet with him, so that we can give him advance notice of our questions, which would do two things. It would allow that attorney to be a little more prepared for our meeting and our questions, and two, it would shorten the meeting up, sticking to a strict agenda of questions, which would ultimately end up saving everybody time and money with that meeting. So with that being said, would somebody like to make a motion we do that?
Can I comment first?
Absolutely.
All right, we've already checked whether or not you can have an executive session with the attorney, and you can't. So, I will be acting as your liaison. So if you have, you can go to the select board if you want, go ahead and write your letter, but the response you're going to get is that any questions that this board has, you write them down and give them to me. You can't, being a committee, you can't have an executive session. All your meetings have.
Well, when I spoke to Michelle the other day, she said that, and she sent me the statute, that there's only certain items that we can actually have an executive session for. Personnel issues, payroll issues, disciplinary actions, and there's a whole list. But one of the acceptable ones is if we have a face-to-face meeting with our attorney and our legal counsel, then we are allowed to have an executive session.
Okay,
So,
write your letter.
I don't want any more than that, because I'm not, so we'll send it, if somebody wants to make a motion and second it, we'll send that letter to the board and see what the response is, I guess. I asked for it verbally and was turned down, so I feel that if we ask it as a committee, then we may be more apt to get one. And if we can't, then they'll tell us in writing what route we have to go, and that's how we'll go. That's all I know. Somebody wanna make a motion to do that?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful, so I'll make a motion that we have, that we request an executive session with the select board and town attorney.
Okay, somebody want a
Second
second? Second it? All those in favor of that? 3, 4, 5? Okay, motion will carry. Please, in the next 10 days, if you have questions specifically that you'd like to ask the attorney, please email them to me. And if you want to make a note of my new email address, I'll give that to everybody now. I made, on Michelle's recommendation, an email address specifically for this committee. And she also recommended that every member on this committee establish a new email address just for this committee, which will keep our personal business personal and our committee business committee business. So mine is Sebago Bayer, so SEBAGO Bayer, BEAR, the number 1 at gmail.com. And I thought I had, Chris. Chris Anderson's email is sebagoanderson@gmail.com. And once I get everybody's email addresses, whether you want to continue your personal or enact a Gmail account, then we'll post that email address on the town website beside each committee's name. And if you would also like to post your phone number, let me know that and we'll post it. If not, then we won't. That's strictly a decision that you can make. So we do want to post the contact number, email address for everybody on the committee that wishes to be contacted by email. And again, please send me that email address that you'd like to be contacted at, so that we can post that.
What was Chris's email again?
Sebago Anderson @gmail.com.
SEN?
ANDERSON. I would like to wait and set a meeting date for our next meeting till after we've met with an attorney, either through Brandon or an executive session with the selectmen. And that's gonna give us more of a scope of our direction and answer some specific legal questions that we have moving this committee forward. So I can go around the room and get any final comments from anybody before we adjourn. Paul, just anything that you'd like to add that
No, except I don't want my phone number made public, I'm gonna try to avoid
that's fine.
external communications on any subject, especially what's going on.
So I have Paul's phone number, and I guarantee Paul that if I call him, it will be for this committee business only, and nothing else. Nothing else will be discussed about planning board, or anything else in the town, or his personal life, or anything. So, just for the record, that if anyone needs to communicate with Paul on this committee, they can email me, and I'll communicate it to Paul. Is that fair enough?
That, just want to avoid direct communications from the public, which don't help.
Exactly. I understand that, and I'm sure everybody does, and we appreciate handling it this professionally, so thank you. Dave, anything you'd like to add?
I'm good, Barry, thank you.
Brandon?
No, I'm good.
You're good? Lori?
I would like to suggest that prior to our next meeting, that we look over what the current state guidelines are for quarries and mineral extraction. And then, as Mr. Cahoon mentioned, the city of Augusta, they have, mining and excavation, that would be their chapter 198. Their land use ordinances are chapter 300. And they have blasting ordinances, which is chapter 130.
So is that something that you'll want to go and get copies, get it to me to disperse to everybody on the committee?
Absolutely.
Okay?
I would also suggest that we look at Wyndham's land ordinances, which would be section 600 for the town of Wyndham.
You want to get those as well?
Yep, and that addresses mineral extraction.
Okay. So per Phil's suggestion, I think would be a great idea, if it's something we're gonna get, we'll get it out to everybody well in advance of the next meeting, so that we're not trying to review something during the meeting, which will keep the meeting moving and spark more interest. Anything else, Laura?
And that's it for now.
Bob?
I just thank everybody for their input and feedback from the group. All very helpful, kind of gets us on the same page, begin to move in that direction. But I think the most important is getting clear about our scope of work as soon as possible.
And Grosvenor?
You know, I thought that discussion tonight was important. Maybe we don't feel like we got somewhere, but we did by discussing these items. And, you know, we have a directive from the town, and we know how the town feels about this, and I think it's something that we owe them to keep in mind.
Well, I think, and thank you all for your comments, and I think Brandon hit on this quite a while ago, when he made a comment that this could take years to do. And I think he's right if we focus on the entire comprehensive plan and the zoning, but if we focus to the job at hand, addressing sand and gravel permits and quarries, it won't be so long. However, I think in order to do this right, we may not be ready to present anything to the town at the town meeting in the spring, depending on how things go. And hence the reason to have extensions on the moratorium, to give this committee time to do the job and do it right. To do a good job, be thorough, and not hurry because, oh my God, we only have 2 months to do it. We have time to do it right, and get plenty of input from people. So,
So, I'll just add, we have an opportunity to do some good things for the town, because there are more issues facing the town than just gravel and mineral extraction. We also, again, times are changing. There's an evolution, of activity. We don't currently have any self-storage facilities, for one thing. We don't have any ordinance regulating self-storage. Solar is another one. We've got solar farms popping up all over the place, and I think everybody will agree that they're mostly an eyesore. Considering where a lot of them are being built, prime agricultural land for one thing, it's just, it's a shame. It's a shame. So, it has been mentioned that, maybe it's time to address these issues as well. Now, we can ignore those issues and just focus on
well, maybe that's a
extraction.
question that we need to ask the legal counsel, Brandon. If the scope of our committee's appointment would allow us to review other items than just sand and gravel pits and quarries. So, that's a good thought, though. And I don't disagree with you at all on that. Dave?
To Brandon's point, he's absolutely 100% right, but the responsibility for that has been on the selectmen and should have been on the selectmen 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to review this comprehensive plan. Ordinances change every year, so I don't know if this particular committee wants to get involved in all that. I don't myself. I didn't sign on for a 5-year project, right, Paul?
Oh, that takes several years, you gotta redo the entire thing.
So, you just have to be in the right state of mind and the right place to sign up for a committee like that.
Well, that's kind of why in the opening I said that we really need to focus on the job at hand, which is gravel and sand pits and quarries, so.
Agreed.
All right, so I'm absolutely fine with it. because, truth be known, I just assume not to review a comprehensive plan. But, I need to bring it up.
Absolutely.
We talk about devil's advocates, and making sure that, that we touch all bases. And that you need to make that decision. And I think that's the first thing that came out of my mouth. We need to make a decision whether we're gonna focus on the comprehensive plan or we're gonna focus on just gravel industries. But, just keep in mind, and this is a very important legal issue. If we focus on just the gravel and mineral extraction, it's gotta be town-wide. We can't single out one lot or one district or one village district among 3 other village districts. It's gotta be town-wide. And it has to apply to everybody, existing mineral operations and future operations. So, I just wanted to throw out that idea that, this may require some compromise and allow some level of activity.
Well, the other thing to consider too is that, I've been talking around town for 3 months now, and when you mention quarry, one person doesn't want a quarry because of dust. One doesn't want it because of noise. One doesn't want it because of vibration. One doesn't want it because of the trucks. Somebody else has got a horse and their horse would flip out if there was a quarry. Another one's worried about groundwater. So there's a whole scope of concerns about it that there's a lot of them in common, but there's a whole bunch of different concerns, and some people could care less about the noise. It's the dust they don't like. Another guy, it's the truck going by. So it's more of a complex issue than just saying, well, I don't want a quarry or whatever. We have to address all the concerns within it as well.
Remember, I deal in facts, so if you have concerns about dust or noise or vibrations or groundwater or your deep wells, come look at the studies, come look at the data, come look at the information. You know, if you wanna, talk about real estate, come look at the, the studies that have been done regarding real estate. Now, again, I'm not supporting them, I'm just
Saying what's there.
I'm saying that, I deal in facts, and what I see is a lot of alarmism and not a lot of consideration of the factual information. So, a lot of people are drawing their own conclusions and creating their own facts, but, the information is there, so please come look at it.
Okay. So, having no other comments from the committee, would anybody in the public at large have an additional comment they'd like to add before we adjourn? Maybe you thought of something that come up in our conversation that you now have questions on.
I would say one thing, I think the overall plan has served us pretty well and has developed the town, I think, in a way that people are pleased with, so keep that in mind. It may not need a complete revamp as much as a look at specific problems.
Thank you. With that being said, thank you, Paul, and thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Ms. Secretary, for volunteering to do this job. Mark for filming it for us tonight, and for you folks out there, thank you for coming tonight. And we'll certainly get a notice out there when we have our next meeting. Thank you all very much.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Would you like to second that? Thank you, Brandon. Paul.
Halfway,